So I started to turn this spalted oak bowl a few months ago when I had my grizzly lathe, and it was just really wobbly and I was getting frustrated with it. So I put it on the shelf, and I was cleaning my shop this week and seen it up there, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna throw this back on the lathe and give it a whirl, see how it turns out. In the beginning of the video, you see that I had filled it with 5-minute epoxy with some bronze and gold mica powder as a filler. Let that sit completely until it hardened. I didn't show it here in the video, but to make my tenon, or cut the tenon straight, I should say, I just this bowl was partially hollowed. It wasn't completely solid. It had some hollowing done to it, so I just put it over top of the chuck with a little bit of that rubber grip stuff, and pinched it, you know, obviously in between centers, and turned a new tenon. Then turned it back around, and this is now shaping it. And I really loved the shape that I originally started with this bowl, so I wanted to keep that as much as I possibly could. And the rim area, I was afraid that I was just gonna lose that detail, and I didn't want to, but thank goodness it ended up where I didn't have to lose it. It's not as much as a rim as I would like to have had, but it'll do, and it ended up turning out, so enjoy. If you feel the lack of being able to really form shapes, and you're having a hard time with proportions, I don't have a particular rule or anything I use. Matter of fact, the rules for turning shapes in the lathe is pretty much the same rules for photography as far as framing the subjects and everything. So maybe that's why some of this isn't easily explained for me, because it's something that I've already have done, you know, with proportions and things like that. But a good tip is go on Pinterest or the internet and just type in, you know, old pottery. Just go through the eras, go through the centuries, and how these pottery shapes are. I mean, from Greeks to you know, modern day stuff. You really get a good idea for really neat shapes, and I love pottery. I'm trying to learn that with my daughter, as well as doing wood turning. So it's a quick tip for you, just if you have a hard time trying to visualize certain shapes, pottery is the way to go. Now it's time for the 10-hour-long sanding. Just kidding. Feels like it takes it long. Anyways, I sanded through 80 grit all the way to 400 on this bowl. I sanded forwards and backwards on the lathe. If your lathe has a reverse, it's great to utilize, especially for the sanding. Here I am emptying sawdust out of my boots. So I'm not going to bore you for the whole complete sanding. I just went through all the grits and drilled out bug holes, and I did fill some with some, what did I use? Oh, super glue, and a little bit of the mica powder I used in the resin, and some bronzy looking glitter. It's not too terribly noticeable in the bowl, but it's just a small detail that's nice to throw in there just to make it extra pretty. So bear with me here on my process. I'm going to use tung oil. It's a finishing oil. It's not designed, obviously, to use as a sanding sealer. I'm not patient enough for tung oil to dry, and then you have to resand it and then add some more coats. I had some time with this bowl because I wasn't going to be back out turning it again for another few days. So I decided, you know, I have this sitting up there, barely ever use it. I'm just going to experiment a little. So bear with me. Put about 2 coats on and then let it set for a few days. So I came back out a few days later, and yes, I'm barefooted. I wasn't expecting to do anything with the bowl. I had put something out in the shed and seen it staring at me like, come finish me. So I was like, well, I'll just sand it down, knock that coat down, and see how that finish is left behind, and go from there. I was in between cooking dinner and trying to get things done in the house, so I just came out and gave it a quick sanding. Then I used my abrasive paste to smooth that out, and then I used 2 coats of shellac. So this is what the piece looks like after 2 coats of OB Shine Juice. It's very pretty, very shiny. I love the OB Shine Juice. It really never disappoints. I decided that I was going to try to put a wax coat of Carnauba wax on top, just to see. It's an experiment, so I mean, the worst comes to worst, you have to sand it off and just do something different. So here in a minute you'll see the results of putting, I think I ended up putting 2 coats of the Carnauba wax. It's a Meguiar's car wax. You can buy it at Walmart for like $10 or something like that. I think it turned out just as shiny. It just gave it an extra smooth glass-like feel when I was finished. So I'm going to use a piece of microcloth rag that I got from Harbor Freight. Just when you use rags and anything that wouldn't, you know, that could be ripped out of your hand or wrapped around your wrist, just use safety precautions. I don't use rags much on the lathe, but I wrapped it up really good in my hand and making sure that nothing loose was hanging out. So just be cautious of that. So I'm just knocking off the first hazy layer and then using a different part of the towel rag to actually do the buffing. I did 2 coats, allowing the wax to dry in between each coat. So I'm feeling on it because it feels just like smooth as glass, just so smooth. I don't know if it really did anything more for the finish other than the feel, but I liked it. It turned out good. Might be a different way of getting to that shiny or different method, but just experiment, try things out. You don't really know what it's going to look like or do until you do it. To hollow this out, I decided to use my Easy Wood Tools rougher hollower. It's the the CIE or CI9. I don't know. It's one of those. Anyways, like I said, this bowl had already started several months ago, but never finished it. So it has some of the hollowing done on it, which made it kind of rough in certain areas because you're having to re-smooth them out instead of just starting over. But it was fine. It took a little time and just being gentle with the cuts because of the cracks that went all the way through the bowl into the bottom. So I have these two cracks that go all the way through to the bottom. I'm going to pull the bowl off the lathe with the chuck still attached and take it over to my workbench and mix up some epoxy and fill that hole. I'm just prepping my area, getting ready for filling the holes with epoxy. I just use these mouthwash cups you get real cheap at Walmart, and I cut them down obviously so they will it won't be so hard to get the epoxy out. So you leave the ball in the chuck. I pulled out some, I use Harbor Freight Quick Set Epoxy A and B, and then some bronze and gold mica powder. I put the mica powder in the bowl first because the stuff you mix and then you have to work with it fast, so I don't want to be fooling around with these powders, and they're kind of dainty and small, the packages, so they're easy to knock over and make a mess. So I just like to get the powders in the bowl and get that closed up, and it just saves me the step while I'm mixing the epoxy, and it's setting up pretty quick. A quick tip is I'm showing you here some eyeshadow. Mica powder is just powder they use in makeup, eyeshadows, blushes, things like that. So I ordered those 2 small round canisters from Wish, and I got like a package of like 10 or 12 or something for, I don't know, it was $3. It was real cheap. You can go to the Dollar Tree or Dollar General. I would go to the Dollar Tree because they have tons of different palettes of makeup, eyeshadows, that come in several different colors, and it's the same exact stuff. It's just they use a caking agent in it so that way it stays in the container. Also, I got glitters and all kinds of things that I have in this case that I've purchased real cheap from dollar stores and what have you to use as fillers. There's a lot of glitter in here, but I'm a girl, so what do you expect? So just a quick tip, you guys, go to the Dollar Generals or Dollar Trees and you can get a whole thing of makeup. Bring $20 in with you and you can get colors for days. And you don't have to use, like, obviously, they have purples, they have, every color you can think of. Smoky eyeshadow that's a real dark brown or black or gray you can use. And it's real cheap. $1 can get you quite a bit if you just go in there and take a look at what they have. So that's a quick tip to get cheap additives for your epoxies. Scraper to scrape off all the excess epoxy and give it one more smooth pass. Now I'm gonna sand it through all the grits. Start with 80 and move my way to 400. It's a little hard getting those corners with my 2-inch disc sander, so I just took the pad off and went in there. I'm going forwards and reverse through each grit too to make sure that I get all of the directions and get it as smooth as I possibly can. inside I decided to do my regular lacquer and lacquer thinner, kind of my sanding sealer, homemade sanding sealer. Not because I didn't like what the tung oil did for the outside of the bowl, but because I was going to go ahead and finish this one tonight, and I wasn't willing to be patient enough to stretch it out another day and have that tung oil dry really well before I started to sand on it. So that's really the only reason. There isn't anything other than my lack of patience that's involved in the why and the way I do things. Homemade abrasive paste for my second process or coat, I guess you can call it. After I apply the lacquer, I lacquer and lacquer thinner mixed. It's 50-50. I knock it back a little bit with 400, and then I use like a Scotch pad, I guess it is, to apply the wax, and then run that through, and then wipe it off with a paper towel to get it clean. Then I apply OB Shine Juice. I think I did about 2 coats. I reapplied it to the outside again because during this process of turning the inside, the outside got dull, and I had gotten some denatured alcohol on it. I think that may have affected the wax, the Caranuba wax finish I had put on it. So I just decided to go ahead and throw another layer of OB Shine Juice. I guess, what have you got to lose, you know? So that's the process I did for the finishing on the inside.